Prairie Village was a quiet suburb south of Kansas City, with tree-lined streets and brick houses where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Canterbury Court was one of those streets, a cul-de-sac lined with mature oaks and two-story homes that all looked more or less the same from the outside. The Farrar house sat near the end of the street, red brick with a double garage and a swing set in the backyard that the youngest children still used on warm weekends. From the street, there was nothing to suggest that anything was wrong inside that house. It was October 1995, and the house on Canterbury Court was about to burn. To understand what happened that October, you have to go back to a small town in Indiana where a girl named Debora Jones grew up knowing she was different from the people around her. She was smarter than her classmates in ways that were obvious to everyone, the kind of student who finished tests first and spent the rest of the period staring out the window at something nobody else could see. Her parents were ordinary people living ordinary Midwestern lives, and Debora wanted something that had nothing to do with ordinary. She wanted medicine. And in the early 1970s, that meant fighting for a place in a world that was not particularly interested in making room for women. Medical school doors were narrow in those years, and the expectations placed on women who walked through them were brutal in ways that are difficult to fully appreciate from the outside. Debora walked through anyway, and she studied harder than almost anyone around her, pushing through exhaustion and the quiet resistance of professors who looked at her and saw someone who didn't quite belong. She graduated, and she became a doctor. And in medical school, she met a man named Michael Farrar, who would change the entire trajectory of her life. Michael Farrar was confident and certain of his future in the particular way of people who have never had serious reason to doubt themselves. They were drawn together the way two driven people sometimes are, by the recognition of someone who understood the weight of what they were each carrying. They married young, graduated together, moved to Kansas City together, and built a medical practice in the suburbs south of the city. Michael became a cardiologist, one of the most respected in the Kansas City area, with a patient list that grew year after year and colleagues who genuinely admired the quality of his work. Debora became an oncologist, which meant she spent her working days sitting with people who were dying and trying to give them more time than the disease intended to allow. She understood the human body at a molecular level, understood how diseases moved through tissue and blood and bone, and she understood with particular precision how certain substances interacted with certain biological systems. She understood poison in the way that very few people outside of medicine ever truly do. That knowledge would matter enormously later. For now, they had a life, a house on Canterbury Court, a shared practice, and 3 children who filled the rooms with noise and motion, and the ordinary beautiful chaos of a family in full swing. Tim was their oldest, a quiet and thoughtful teenager who spent long hours in his room with headphones on, and a talent for going unnoticed in a household that was beginning to come apart. He was 16 years old in October 1995. Kate was their middle child, 13 years old, with brown hair and a wide smile and a fierce tenderness toward living things that expressed itself most clearly in the stray animals she brought home from the neighborhood. The family had 2 dogs because of Kate, both rescues, and she had a plan to become a veterinarian that she talked about with the confidence of someone who had already decided and was simply waiting for the years to catch up. Kelly was the youngest, 6 years old, still small enough to be carried when she fell asleep on the couch on a Friday night. She slept with a nightlight in her room at the top of the stairs, and she called for her mother when bad dreams woke her in the early hours of the morning. 3 children in a brick house on a quiet cul-de-sac, each of them deserving of a life that had time to become something. But inside the house on Canterbury Court, something had been rotting for years before anyone outside the family knew to look. Debora's medical career had stalled while Michael's continued to accelerate, and the gap between them had become something neither of them could comfortably acknowledge out loud. The alcohol had started quietly, a glass of wine with dinner, 2 glasses, a bottle on a Tuesday night after the children were asleep. And it escalated the way these things always do, gradually and then suddenly. The argument started behind closed doors and then stopped being behind closed doors, and the silences between Michael and Debora grew longer and heavier until they had their own weight and presence in the rooms of that house. And then Michael met a woman named Margaret Hacker, a colleague at the hospital, calm and composed in the ways that Debora had stopped being calm and composed. He began spending more time at work and less time on Canterbury Court, more evenings at the hospital, more weekends that ran long into the night. Debora knew because she had always been perceptive even when she was drinking, and she watched her marriage dissolve from the inside with the helplessness of someone who can see exactly what is happening and cannot make themselves stop it. In the summer of 1995, Michael Farrar got sick in a way that had no obvious explanation. It started with nausea, a persistent rolling nausea that wouldn't resolve, and progressed to vomiting and a physical weakness so profound that he struggled to climb the stairs to his own bedroom. He went to colleagues at the hospital and they ran tests, and the results came back confusing and inconsistent, nothing that made sense for a man his age with no significant medical history. He got better after a few days, went home, felt normal, and then got sick again with the same symptoms in the same sequence. The pattern repeated itself over the course of that summer, each episode following the same progression without variation, each one arriving after meals that Debora had prepared in the kitchen of the house on Canterbury Court. Michael Farrar was a cardiologist who had spent his career understanding the mechanisms of the human body, and he was not the kind of man who ignored patterns. He began to notice that the episodes happened at home, after eating food from his own kitchen, and never at the hospital and never when he was traveling. The thought arrived slowly, and then with a certainty that was impossible to argue with. His wife was trying to kill him. Ricin is derived from castor beans, and is one of the most toxic substances that occurs naturally on this earth, so lethal that a quantity smaller than a grain of salt is enough to kill a healthy adult. It has no antidote and no effective treatment once it enters the bloodstream, and it works by shutting down cells' ability to synthesize the proteins they need to survive, causing organ failure from the inside in a process that can take days. To the untrained eye, it looks like a severe gastrointestinal illness, which is precisely why it is so difficult to detect without specific testing. Debora Green was an oncologist who understood exactly how ricin moved through a human body, and she had ordered castor beans, and she had processed them into something that could be dissolved into food without being detected by taste or smell. Over the course of the summer of 1995, she had been adding ricin to her husband's meals in quantities calculated to make him sick enough to suffer without dying quickly enough to trigger an immediate investigation. Michael checked himself into the hospital in late September 1995, told his doctors what he suspected, and the tests came back positive for ricin. He refused to go home. He filed for divorce on September 30th, 1995, and Debora received the papers on a Friday afternoon in early October. And whatever remained of the marriage ended in that moment with the arrival of a document that made permanent what had already been true for a long time. Nobody knows with certainty what Debora Green felt in the hours and days after those divorce papers arrived, because she has never spoken about it publicly, and the internal experience of that time belongs entirely to her. What is known is that she stayed in the house on Canterbury Court with her 3 children, and she made a decision, and on the night of October 24th, 1995, she acted on it. October 24th was a Wednesday, cold enough by 10 o'clock that the families on Canterbury Court had their furnaces running, the kind of mid-autumn evening in Kansas where the temperature drops fast after sunset and the street goes quiet early. The Farrar house was dark on the outside except for the upstairs windows, where Tim was in his room with his headphones on. Kate was in her bedroom down the hall, and Kelly was asleep in her room at the top of the stairs with the nightlight on. At some point after midnight, a fire started inside the house. Not the way accidental fires start, from a single source spreading outward, but in multiple places simultaneously, because accelerant had been poured in a pattern designed to ensure that the fire would move fast and close doors before the people inside them could reach those doors. Tim woke to smoke and heat, and managed to get himself out of the house and onto the cold lawn in his pajamas, and he turned around and screamed for his sisters. Kate was 13 years old, and she did not come out. Kelly was 6 years old, and she did not come out either. By the time the firefighters arrived and worked through the burning structure, both girls were gone, and the house on Canterbury Court was hollowed out by fire and smoke and the irreversible destruction of something that could never be rebuilt into what it was before. Debora Green told investigators that she had been asleep when the fire started, that she hadn't smelled smoke until it was too late, that she hadn't heard anything unusual before the flames were already beyond control. She was calm when she said this, and investigators noted her calmness in their reports, the particular composed quality of someone who is not experiencing the acute shock that the situation would seem to demand. Tim told a different story when investigators spoke with him, carefully, and with the measured words of a teenager who understood that what he said next would matter for a long time. He said his mother had been awake that night before the fire started, that she had seemed different, quieter, more deliberate, and that there had been something wrong in the house before the smoke arrived. Arson investigators walked through the ruins of the house on Canterbury Court and identified the accelerant patterns and mapped the multiple points of origin that confirmed what the fire's behavior had already suggested. This was deliberate arson, set by someone with access to the house who had prepared the scene in advance. Investigators pulled the threads of the family's recent history and found the divorce filing, and found Michael's hospitalization, and found the Ricin test results, and found the records of castor bean purchases, and the picture that assembled itself from those pieces was one of sustained, premeditated intent. A woman had spent an entire summer trying to kill her husband with one of the most toxic substances on earth, and when that failed, and the divorce papers arrived, she had set fire to the house with her children inside it. Debora Green was arrested in late 1995 and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Kate and Kelly, 1 count of attempted murder for the ricin poisoning of Michael Farrar, and 1 count of aggravated arson. The evidence was extensive: the ricin, the accelerant patterns, the multiple points of origin, the timing of the fire 4 days after the divorce papers arrived, and the testimony of both Tim and Michael. In 1996, Debora Green entered an offered plea, a legal instrument that allows a defendant to accept a sentence without formally admitting guilt, acknowledging instead that the prosecution has sufficient evidence to obtain a conviction at trial. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murders of Kate and Kelly, with an additional 13 years consecutive for the attempted murder of Michael Farrar. She was led out of the courtroom without having said a word about what she had done or why she had done it. The parole hearings came at intervals over the years, and each time the Kansas Parole Board reviewed the case, they looked at the totality of what Debora Green had done and denied her release. She has been denied parole multiple times across nearly 3 decades of incarceration, and she has attended those hearings and gone back to her cell each time without having offered any public explanation for the night of October 24, 1995. She has never explained the fire. She has never said the names Kate and Kelly in any public statement. Michael Farrar survived and eventually rebuilt his life in another state, remarrying and continuing his medical career and moving forward with the determined grief of someone who has no alternative to continuing. He has spoken publicly about Kate and Kelly on rare occasions, about who they were and what they deserved, and he has not expressed public hatred for Debora Green, which is a restraint that says something about the kind of person he is. Tim Farrar was 16 years old on that lawn on Canterbury Court, and he is a grown man now, and he has never spoken extensively in public about what that night left him with, a silence that deserves to be respected. Kate Farrar was 13 years old when she died, and she wanted to be a veterinarian, and she had already begun becoming the person she was going to be. She brought home strays because she could not walk past something that needed help, and she had her whole life arranged in front of her, a career she would never have, a person she would never fully become. Kelly Farrar was 6 years old, and she slept with a nightlight because she was afraid of the dark, and she called for her mother when bad dreams woke her at night, and on the night of October 24th, she needed her mother, and her mother was the reason she didn't survive until morning. Both girls deserved to grow up, and neither of them did, and that fact sits at the center of this case like something that cannot be explained away no matter how many years pass. Debora Green was genuinely brilliant, and brilliance is often treated as a kind of moral credential, and this case demonstrates clearly that it is not. She had fought her way into medicine when the doors were narrow. She had treated cancer patients for years with genuine skill, and she understood better than almost anyone what it meant to fight for a life. And then she became something else. And 2 children died because she did. Psychiatrists who study cases like this talk about narcissistic injury, the particular violence that lives inside certain people who cannot survive the experience of being left, a rage that turns inward and then outward, and eventually downward onto the people closest to the source of the pain. Kate had nothing to do with the divorce, and neither did Kelly, And they paid with their lives for something they had no part in creating. How does a person travel from one place to the other? From the woman who fought her way through medical school to the woman who poured accelerant on the floors of the house where her children were sleeping. Was it the alcohol, dismantling her judgment for years before the fire? Was it the divorce, removing the last structure holding something together that needed to fall apart long before those papers arrived? Or was it something broken inside her long before any of this, something that pressure simply revealed rather than created? I don't have a clean answer, and I think the honest thing is to acknowledge that some cases resist the kind of explanation that makes the world feel orderly again. What I know is that 2 girls are gone, and the person who took them is still alive, and that asymmetry is something the world simply has to sit with. There is a street in Prairie Village, Kansas called Canterbury Court, and the house that stood there in October 1995 is gone, replaced by something with no memory of what happened in its rooms. But Kate Farrar was real, and she existed, and she mattered. And Kelly Farrar was real, and she existed, and she mattered. Remember them. What do you think drove Debora Green to the night of October 24, 1995? Was it the divorce? The alcohol? The rage of someone who could not survive being left? Or something darker that none of us can fully reach from the outside? Leave your verdict in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to Family Crimes for a new case every week, because the darkest secrets hide at home.